Welcome to Blonde Cards and Crafts. Let's make something together. Hello everyone. Today I wanted to share with you this fabulous die that I got. This die is by My Favorite Things and it's a Die-Namics die of a Christmas tree. And what it does is this die will cut out the shape of this Christmas tree. Now it cuts it into your paper or your card, so you get to see through this. So I have cut these out on a white card, and behind them I have backed then different coloured papers from different paper pads that I have in my stash. Altogether I'll have made 13, including what we're going to make together today, but I'm going to show you some of the cards that I have made. As I said, I used different paper packs that I had in my stash, and what I've also done is I've die cut out the little star on the top. When I die cut this out, it die cuts out the white card, so I used just the star part of the die to die cut out stars in different golds and golden glitters and whatnot, so that they could be a focal point at the top of the tree. Some of the cards I have embellished using a silver or gold marker, which you could see in the last two cards there. Just to kind of embellish the whiteness. There seems to be a lot of white on my cards, but that's because these are all 6x6 cards that I've made. Some have a scalloped edge and some have just a straight edge, and they're basically all a card blank. So this card base measures 12 by 6 and scored at 6. Then we just fold it on the score line, and I'm going to take my scoring tool and burnish that score line so I have a nice crease. Here I have a 6x6 scalloped edged card. So it measures 12 by 6 again and scored at 6. And then I'm folding it on the score line, and again I'll use my scoring to burnish that score line so it's nice and creased. So as I said, these are ready-made card bases that I have in my stash that I'm going to use. So now we need a piece of card or decorative paper to put in the background, and this measures 5.5 by 5.5. And the reason I'm doing that is I want a nice border around the actual white card base. So there's two different sides to this piece of card, and I'm going to go with the tartan look. And you can use, like I said, any of your paper pads to put, your papers behind the actual die cut image. So I have a piece of white card here. And again, you can do this in red or gold or silver, whatever you like. And this piece measures 5 by 5. So we'll have a nice border between our white layer here, our patterned paper, and then our card base. So I'm going to take some washi tape and I'm going to stick down my die onto this white card base because I don't want it to move on this. I want to make sure that it's centered on the piece of card and where I want it die cut out. So here we go. It's towards the top piece because I want to leave room at the bottom so I can stamp down my sentiment. So I'm going to do this to two pieces of our white card. The first one just has one in the middle, and this one I'm going to die cut out my tree 3 times. It's very hard to say 3 as in the number and tree as in the object when you're Irish, because it all just sounds like tree. Anyway, so I'm going to die cut out this 3 times, and there we go. So I have a very small border, as you can see there on the left and right side, but that's okay. I'm not putting foam tape behind it to make a shaker card, although you could do that and it would look really cool. So the 3 threes are going to go on this red card or patterned paper, and then my single tree is going to go on the tartan paper. And I'm just going to stick that down. You can use Nuvo glue or Tombow, or you can use double-sided tape, whatever you like. Now I found I have a little punch in my stash, and it cuts out a star the exact same size as the star that gets die cut out at the top of the tree. So rather than having to die cut out using my die, I'm just going to use my punch. I was really lucky. It was such a fluke that that worked. But as I said, you can just use the little star part of the die and die cut out your star if you want to do that. So using my punch, I punched out a load of little stars. I used a shiny gold, I used a glitter card in gold, and a kind of a matte gold cardstock for all my little stars. Next, I'm going to stamp my sentiment down onto the front panels that we have die cut. So I'm going to use my mini Misty here. My piece of paper will fit just about into the mini Misty, so it'll save me bringing out my bigger stamping platform. So I have a sentiment that I'm going to use, and it's Merry and Bright. This stamp came from a free stamp set which was in Simply Cards and Papercraft magazine last year, and if I can find a copy of the magazine I will leave it in the description linked down below. This set here, it has classic Christmas on it, and you can see there it came from the Simply Cards and Papercraft magazine, but unfortunately I never put which issue it was, so I don't remember, but it's a lovely set, and if I can find links to it I'll definitely put them in the description down below. There's plenty of sentiments on this stamp set, and I'm going to use, as I said, the Merry and Bright, and that's going to fit nicely right underneath where we've die cut out our Christmas tree. I'm going to make sure that's nice and straight because, well, although there usually is something wonky on my cards, I do try and make sure that everything is lined up and straight. I have my Versafine Onx black ink, and I'm going to use that to stamp the sentiment. It'll probably take more than one stamping with these. They're not a photopolymer stamp. I'd say they're a silicone stamp, but they still stamp really well. It's just sometimes it'll take more than one stamping, and I find the Versafine is one of the best. There are plenty of other great inks on the market, but I like to use this. So there we go, we have our Merry and Bright all stamped down nicely. I'm happy with that. Next I'm going to stamp the sentiment on our trees, and I'm going to use the same Merry and Bright sentiment, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to clean it off really well using a water wet wipe or baby wipe, and I'm going to make sure I get all the ink off as well as drying it off on a microfiber cloth. I've just done that off camera there that you can see, but I want to make sure that it's nice and dry and that there's no little fibers on this, because I don't want it now to mark my card here at the front. So I'm happy with that. I'm happy with the placement. It looks evenly balanced between the two bottom trees on the left and the right. So again, I'm going to use my Versafine ink, and I'm going to stamp that down. Now you could use your ink and emboss. You can use many others. I have the Memento ones as well as the Ranger ones, but like I said, you can use whatever you're happy with. The Versafine is great if you're going to use embossing powders. That stays sticky for a little bit longer so that you can add your powder and then heat it up with your tool. Here I'm going to use my Ranger black ink and stamp that down and see what impression we get using that. But like I said, they're all pretty much, you know, they're all really good. It's just whatever you have a preference for. And I have to say my preference, what I tend to reach for the most, is the Versafine, because although it stays wet a little bit longer, so you do have to be careful. You know, if you touch it, you're going to smear it. You just have to be careful. But I can use this just to stamp a sentiment, or I can use it if I want to heat emboss. And sometimes when Simone is here crafting, she just decides, oh, I'll just stamp that down. And then I'll get a notion and think, that'd be lovely heat embossed in gold or in silver or in a wine colour. So at least it means that I can go ahead and do that if I have a notion. And sure, isn't that what crafting is all about? It's being inspired. Not just, it's great to work things out before you start crafting. And I'd love to be the type of person that sits down and designs my card and what I want to do. Most of the time, guys, I'm flying by the seat of my pants. I might have a die in mind or a stamp in mind, but I just go with the flow, whatever comes out of my head while I'm doing it. That's how I craft. It doesn't work for a lot of people, but that's what works for me. I have my glue here, and this is the Collal glue, and the top, the nozzle actually opens by twisting it, so you can have a heavy flow or a light flow coming out, and I like to have it at a light flow. I have my die cut images here, and I'm going to use this Collal glue. It takes a little bit longer than the Nuvo glue to dry, and if it smears out, it will leave a little residue or a little mark. It won't be a tacky residue, it dries so that there's no feeling of the glue there, but you will see a little mark on your paper, so you do need to be careful with it. But when this stuff dries, it is awesome. It dries really stiff, so you get a good catch between the glue and the paper. You get a really strong finish. Now there's room there now to wiggle, my die cut piece around so I can make sure it's centered and be happy with it. But I know within a minute or two that has caught, it's going to hold the paper firmly and it gives it a nice solid finish. So if you flicked against it, you would feel it nearly gives it like a chipboard effect. It's fantastic. It does, because it's this adhesive. Let me just look. It does have a kind of a glue smell off it, whatever chemicals are involved in this glue. But I know that they use this in book binding and things like that. One of the crafters that I watch, Sam from Mixed Up Crafts, she uses this glue a lot, and I have to say I am so glad that I got some. I got a 3-pack on Amazon. You can also buy them individually from all around the world, but the Nuvo glue would be my go-to glue for a good stick. But if I want to make sure that there's some rigidity to what I'm sticking together, then I'll use the Collal. Anyway, enough about that. I have a little tiny bit of a smudge from, I don't know whether it's ink or a little bit of glue off my table, the mat, but it came right off using that little eraser there. So okay, I have my 2 die cut pieces stuck to their matte layers, and now I'm going to put them onto their cards. Because I'm putting this one onto the scalloped edge, you have to allow for the scallop on your card base. So although it's a 6x6 card, I need to make sure my matte layer is only 5.5, and that way I have a nice border around the scallop edging. Hence the reason I went with the 5.5 by 5.5 matte, and then the 5x5 white layer that I've die cut into. And I think this looks really nice. It also, because I'm only using a 5x5 inch white piece of cardstock for my Christmas tree, it's minimizing all the white space on the front, because I'm not embellishing, any of the white space, putting down sequins or anything like that. I'm going for a really clean look to the cards. I'm sorry about my camera, it's kind of zooming in and out because of the glue bottle I'm using. I hope it doesn't freak out your eyes, guys. You can see here that the Collal glue goes on clear. And as I said, I have the flow on to slow, to just a little trickle coming out, because this glue, less is more. You don't need to use, I'd say I use half the amount of glue from the Collal as what I would use if I was using Nuvo glue. So yeah, it's grand in that way that you're actually using less. I go through so much Nuvo glue, guys, so yeah, the Collal glue is handy like that. Anyway, I have them both now set down on the card bases. Now inside we need to put a sentiment. You could do this while you're stamping your Merry and Brights on the front of your, your card. But I've just, like I said, flying by the seat of my pants here. I'm just going to stamp that once the cards are made. I have the Tim Holtz stamping platform, so there's loads of room for me to do that. I'm just looking at the Bright here. There's a couple of little white dots where the ink didn't fill in, so I'm just taking a liner pen and I'm filling in the ink on that. Perfect, just because I'm a bit fussy like that. Really guys, it probably didn't even need it. I'm just being a little OTT, OCD, whatever the abbreviation is. But anyway, I'm happy with that. Inside I'm going to stamp this Have Yourself a Merry Little Christmas stamp. I've been using this quite a lot in my Christmas cards. This stamp stamps beautifully. Again, it's not a photopolymer, I don't think, but these stamps on this, which was another freebie from a magazine that I got last year, Crafts Beautiful magazine. And again, I will try and link this issue. I kind of struggle because I didn't write down which issue it was, but if I can find it, I will link it down below. I'm going to stamp it just using a stamping block. Now again, you could use your stamping platform, whether it's a Misty or a We Are Memory Keepers. There's so many of them out on the market. You can use your stamping platform or just a block. And I've used this stamp, as I said, many times in my cards, and it stamps beautifully. So I'm going to use my Ranger black ink and I'm going to freehand stamp this down. So I just want to make sure that my stamp is fully loaded with my ink. So I'm going to bring the ink to the stamp rather than the other way around. I do it both ways, guys, to be honest. But yeah, as long as it's well inked up, this stamp is really good to go. Some stamps I have, I will definitely use a stamping platform because I know they'll take more than once. But this one I know is going to do a great job. So I'm just going to try and make sure I get even pressure all over the stamping block. And voila, there we go. Lovely. Delighted with that. And it's more or less center in the card, so whoop, I'm chuffed with that. Sometimes it might be a little to the left or a little to the right, but guys, it's a handmade card. It's not Hallmark, so we're not going to stress the small stuff. These cards aren't made where they're spat out and they're hundreds and hundreds by machines. They're hand done. That's what people love. When you give them a handmade card, or if people buy a handmade card, they like the fact that everyone is different. Even if you're making 13 of the same card, they'll all be a little bit different in some way. I digress. I tend to go into a rant when I'm talking about handmade cards and the generically spat out cards, but there you go. So that's our stamping done. All I have to do now is stamp my little Blanc Cards and Crafts logo on the back, and I'll do that later. So here I'm taking my Nuvo glue, and because this will dry clear and it won't leave any marks, I'm going to put a little drop of this in each of the holes where our star shape is. This is what I'm going to use to adhere down my little punched out stars. I've got, as I said, some in the gold glitter and the matte gold and the shiny gold, and I'm going to pop them all into place there. And with that then, the only other thing is if you want to embellish the rest of the card. You can use sequins, or you can use some of the gems or pearls. There's so many different things on the market you can use, and you can put them along the sways or swags, what do you call those little bits there on the actual tree? The word has gone out of my mind, but you could embellish where the little stars and baubles are on the trees. I did for a couple of the cards, but most of them I just left as they are, so I would have a really clean and simple look to the cards. So there's our two cards using the My Favorite Things Die-Namics Christmas tree die. I'd like to thank you all for watching. If you've enjoyed my tutorial, please click the like button down below. If you're a subscriber, thanks for subscribing, and if not, you might consider clicking on the subscribe icon down below. Don't forget to click the little notification bell, that way when I post more videos you'll be notified. You can find me on Facebook, Instagram and Twitter. And until next time, bye bye.